What if you lost everything, and the only person who answered was a billionaire? The California sun was harsh that morning, casting long shadows over the cracked pavement outside the modest aerospace plant in Hawthorne where Emma Carter had worked for nearly a decade. She walked out of the building holding a white envelope in one hand and her phone in the other, the contents of the envelope now burned into her memory like a cruel tattoo: layoff notice. Effective immediately. Thank you for your service. She stood silently in the parking lot, her reflection faintly visible in the side mirror of her 2009 Honda Civic, which had chosen this moment to die. The engine had wheezed and stalled just as she'd parked, as if in solidarity with her unraveling life. She leaned against the car, mind numb, thoughts spiraling. She had a 10-year-old son to feed, rent due in 5 days, and exactly $182 in her checking account. Her stomach ached, not from hunger but from shame. The kind that coils inside you when you realize your worst fears are no longer just possibilities but your new reality. Her hand trembled as she unlocked her phone. She opened Twitter, not because she thought it would help, but because doom-scrolling felt easier than facing the next decision. Her fingers hovered, then moved, as if acting on instinct, and she typed the message that would alter the trajectory of her life: used to build your rockets. Now I can't afford gas. Guess that's kind of ironic. At Elon Musk. She hit send without thinking. The tweet wasn't angry, or hopeful. It was just there, like a cry into the void, a digital whisper meant for no one and everyone at once. She expected nothing. A few likes, maybe. A snarky comment. But nothing that could change anything real. She closed the app and sighed. The wind picked up, sweeping dust across the lot. Somewhere in the distance, the roar of an aircraft taking off reminded her of what she once helped build. She sat on the hood of her car, staring up at the blue sky, wondering if this was the lowest point or just the beginning of a long free fall. Her phone buzzed, but she ignored it. Another automated bill reminder, probably. A moment later, it buzzed again. Then again. And again. She picked it up and saw it, dozens of notifications. Her tweet had gone viral. Strangers were retweeting it, commenting with sympathy or sarcasm, but what made her freeze was the blue checkmark reply sitting at the top. Kindness is underrated. DM me. Elon Musk. Her breath caught. It wasn't a parody account. It wasn't a bot. It was the real deal. Verified. Elon Musk had replied. For a full 10 seconds, she couldn't process the words. Then, her heart surged like a launch countdown hitting 0. Was it a joke? A setup? Her fingers trembled as she opened the DM tab. There it was, short and clear: Hi Emma. Saw your tweet. Can I call you? Her mind spun. She hadn't given her number. Then she saw another message with a secure link and instructions to verify her identity through a SpaceX contact portal. It felt surreal, dreamlike, like she had somehow stepped sideways into another dimension. She followed the steps, uploaded her ID, and received a prompt: Thank you, Emma. One of our team members will be in touch within 24 hours. She sat there, blinking at the screen, heart racing. Could this be real? Could a tweet, one moment of digital desperation, actually be the key to turning her life around? She wasn't naive. She knew that attention on social media often burned bright and died fast. And yet, something about that reply felt deliberate, thoughtful. Kindness is underrated. The words echoed in her mind. For the rest of the day, Emma moved like a ghost through her own life. She picked up Leo from school, forced a smile, and asked about his day while hiding the tornado spinning inside her. He told her about a new science experiment involving magnets and soda cans. She nodded and pretended to listen, all the while thinking, what does one say to a billionaire? What if this is nothing? What if it's everything? That night, as Leo slept in the next room, she sat on the floor beside the kitchen table, her laptop open, reading article after article about Elon Musk, his companies, his tweets, his reputation. Visionary, eccentric, unpredictable. Brilliant and chaotic. She'd spent years working on components used in Falcon 9 launches, but had never been anywhere near the man himself. And now, suddenly, she might be. The next morning came with a knock on the door, not from eviction or repo men, but from a delivery service. A man in a black polo shirt handed her a sealed envelope marked with the SpaceX logo. Inside was a letter inviting her to visit the company's headquarters for a brief conversation regarding potential collaboration opportunities, along with flight tickets, hotel information, and a small prepaid card for travel expenses. She stared at it for several minutes before sitting down, her legs no longer able to support the weight of her disbelief. Leo bounced into the room in his pajamas, munching on a granola bar. "What's that, Mom?" he asked. She looked at him, then held up the envelope. "It's an invitation," she said softly. "From a rocket company." His eyes widened. "Like where you used to work?" She nodded. He grinned. "Are you going back?" She looked at the letter again. "I don't know yet. But maybe something even better." That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind kept replaying everything, the job loss, the tweet, the reply, the letter. It all felt impossibly fast, like life had slammed a door only to open a trapdoor beneath her feet and send her soaring in a completely different direction. She had no idea what would happen next. No idea what Elon Musk actually wanted to say. But one thing was clear, someone powerful had noticed her, not because she was important, but because she had spoken from a place of raw honesty. And somehow, that had broken through the noise. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? For Emma, it had always been love. Love for Leo. Love for building things that mattered. Love for the quiet belief that somewhere, somehow, kindness could still count. Even if it took a billionaire to prove it. Emma Carter didn't become an engineer because she loved numbers or because she was some kind of math prodigy. She became an engineer because when she was 12 years old and her world shattered, building things was the only way she could keep herself from falling apart. Her father, Thomas Carter, had been a commercial pilot and the center of her world. Every Saturday, he'd take her to the little aviation museum just outside of Long Beach, where she would marvel at the restored cockpits, the propeller engines, and the towering rockets that seemed like frozen lightning. He would kneel beside her, his calloused hands on her shoulders, and whisper, "One day, you're going to make something that changes the world, kiddo." But one Thursday morning in November, he took off from Burbank Airport on a routine flight and never came home. Engine failure, the officials said. Mechanical malfunction. A tragedy, unavoidable. But to Emma, it wasn't mechanical. It was personal. It was abandonment. She remembered sitting in the principal's office at school, clutching her backpack, staring at the wall as her mother sobbed beside her. Nothing felt real. Everything had an echo. After the funeral, her mother changed. The vibrant woman who used to sing while cooking pancakes, who danced in the living room with her girls on Sunday mornings, began to shrink. Some days, she didn't get out of bed. Some nights, she drank herself into a stupor, weeping on the kitchen floor. Emma learned quickly that no one was coming to save them. And so she did what engineers do best, she figured things out. She learned how to budget grocery money, how to pack lunches for her little sister, how to lie to teachers about why homework was missing or why she was too tired to stay awake in class. But in the small sliver of time she had for herself, she built. She took broken radios from the trash, old computers from neighbors, even scraps of cardboard, duct tape, and leftover fireworks from 4th of July celebrations. In her bedroom, she designed her own miniature rockets. She failed more often than not. Sometimes they exploded into bursts of sparks on the sidewalk. But every time one lifted off, even an inch, she felt something in her chest rise with it. That feeling stayed with her. Through middle school, through high school, through community college where she worked nights at a diner and saved every penny to transfer to Cal State LA's engineering program. Her professors saw something in her, determination edged with pain, a tenacity they couldn't teach in labs. She graduated with honors, got her first job as a junior systems technician at a firm that subcontracted for SpaceX, and for the first time in her life, it felt like maybe, just maybe, she had made it out. Then came David. He was charming in the way only lost men are. He'd been working on a ground control systems contract and liked to play guitar at open mics. He called her the girl with Saturn eyes, and wrote her terrible songs. She didn't love him at first, but she wanted to believe in someone. They got married fast. Too fast. When she got pregnant with Leo, she thought it would anchor them together. But the truth was, he didn't want to be tied down. When Leo was 3, David packed up and left. "I'm not built for this," he'd said. "You're stronger than me." That was the last honest thing he ever said to her. Emma never begged him to stay. She just folded up the nursery blankets, put on her steel-toed boots, and went back to work. For a while, everything was just survival. The hours were long, the daycare bills relentless, the loneliness oppressive. But at night, when Leo curled into her side, she remembered what it felt like to believe in something. He had his grandfather's eyes, hazel with gold flecks, and a laugh that sounded like wine through leaves. He was the only thing she couldn't engineer or control, and he made life beautiful in ways she hadn't known were possible. They didn't have much. A one-bedroom apartment with peeling paint, second-hand furniture, and the same coffee maker her mom once used before she vanished from Emma's life entirely. But they had routines. Pancakes on Saturdays. Lego building contests on Sundays. Story time every night, where Leo insisted on being the one to read even if he stumbled over every third word. She never told him how many nights she cried after he fell asleep. Or how many job applications she filled out between midnight and 2 a.m. She didn't tell him about the nights she wrote letters, dozens of them, detailing her fears, her hopes, her apologies. Letters she never gave him. Letters that sat in a shoebox in the back of the closet because she didn't want him to grow up knowing how close she had come to giving up. Her only friend in the world was Sandra, her neighbor and fellow single mom who worked at the local hospital as a nurse. They met in the laundry room one night when Emma's washer broke and she was crying into a basket of wet clothes. Sandra had handed her a wine cooler and said, "Life's a mess. Let's do laundry and cry together." And that was that. Sandra became family. When Leo was sick, she brought soup. When Emma couldn't afford Christmas presents, she found a way to make magic out of nothing. Their friendship was one of the few things Emma trusted. Because kindness like that didn't come with conditions. It came with presence. And presence, she had learned, was the rarest currency of all. So when she got the letter from SpaceX, when the impossible invitation arrived, Emma didn't call David. She didn't tell her estranged mother, who lived in Arizona and hadn't spoken to her in years. She told Sandra. Over takeout chicken wings and lukewarm white wine, she read the letter out loud and waited for the world to make sense. "Girl," Sandra said, staring at her. "You realize Elon freaking Musk just invited you to his HQ, right?" Emma nodded slowly. "But I don't know what he wants. Maybe it's a PR stunt. Or maybe it's nothing. Or maybe," Sandra said, pointing her chicken wing like a prophecy stick, "he saw someone smart, brave, and real, and decided to open a door. Don't talk yourself out of a miracle." Emma laughed, but it cracked a little at the edges. She wasn't used to hope. Hope felt like a luxury for people with backup plans. But she also wasn't going to walk away from the one open door that had appeared in a year filled with locked ones. That night, she packed for the trip, just one small suitcase with her best blouse, her work boots, and a folder of project notes from her past engineering roles. She didn't know if she'd need them, but she wanted to be ready. Leo helped her pack, adding in a drawing he made of a rocket with the words, "Go, Mom," written in red crayon. The next morning, Sandra drove her to LAX. Leo gave her the longest hug he'd ever given. "Bring me back a moon rock," he whispered. She smiled and kissed his forehead. "Only if you promise to take a bath without arguing while I'm gone." "Deal," he grinned. As the plane lifted off, Emma stared out the window and tried to make sense of it all. The girl who used to build rockets out of junk was now flying toward the place where real rockets were born. And not because she applied for a job. Not because she had the perfect resume or knew the right people. But because she had told the truth, and someone powerful had listened. She didn't know what Elon Musk would say. She didn't know if it would be an opportunity or a disappointment. But for the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar rise inside her. Not fear. Not panic. Not even hope. It was something deeper. A quiet, pulsing belief that maybe, just maybe, kindness could change the trajectory of a life. Emma didn't sleep much the night before her meeting at SpaceX. The hotel room was nice in a way that made her feel small, like she didn't belong in a place with plush towels and crisp sheets and lighting that made her look well-rested even when she wasn't. She sat at the little desk by the window with her laptop open, not doing anything productive, just staring at the blinking cursor on a blank document as if it held answers. Every few minutes she'd glance at the clock, then at her phone, then back to the screen. In the quiet of the night, the doubts were louder. What if this was a mistake? What if Elon had replied to the wrong tweet? What if this was a weird PR stunt and she was just a prop in someone else's headline? She didn't know, and the not knowing clawed at her. But she also couldn't shake the feeling that something real was waiting on the other side of this. The next morning, she got dressed slowly, carefully, picking the dark blue blouse Leo said made her look space bossy, and the slacks she wore to her last interview. She pulled her hair into a braid and wore no makeup, just a little lip balm. She wanted to feel like herself. She wanted to be herself. When the car arrived, she stepped into the back seat clutching the portfolio of notes she had compiled from old projects. They weren't polished. They weren't revolutionary. But they were hers. At the SpaceX campus, she was greeted by a woman named Elise, who introduced herself as a program manager and led her through a series of glass corridors. Everything was sleek, clean, humming with purpose. Engineers in hoodies and lab coats walked past her carrying blueprints and coffee, talking in acronyms. For a moment, Emma felt a strange kind of homesickness, not for a place, but for a version of herself she hadn't seen in years. The woman she used to be before fear crept into every decision. Elise stopped outside a glass-walled conference room. "Wait here a moment," she said, then stepped inside. Emma watched through the glass as Elise spoke with someone she couldn't see from her angle. Her hands were shaking. She closed them into fists. She tried to remember what Leo had told her the night before over FaceTime, "You're like Iron Man, Mom. Only smarter." She smiled, just a little. Then the door opened. "He'll see you now." Emma stepped inside. The room was stark, just a long metal table, a few chairs, a whiteboard with equations scrawled across it, and at the head of the table, Elon Musk. He stood and extended a hand. "Emma. Thanks for coming." His voice was calmer than she expected, a little tired but focused. She shook his hand, feeling like her palm had turned to concrete. "Thank you for the invitation," she said. He gestured for her to sit. "I read your tweet. It stuck with me. Not because it was dramatic or angry. Just, honest." She nodded, unsure what to say. "A lot of people ask me for things," he continued, "money, jobs, endorsements. But your message wasn't about any of that. It was about irony and loss. And resilience." She blinked. "I wasn't expecting a reply. I was just, venting." He leaned forward. "Do you want to build again?" The question hit her harder than she expected. She felt something behind her eyes begin to sting. Yes, she said, steadying her voice. More than anything. What would you build if you had the chance? He asked. She paused. She hadn't prepared a pitch. This wasn't a job interview, but somehow it was more important. I'd build something that helps people, she said slowly. Something that uses the skills people like me already have. There are a lot of engineers, brilliant ones, who've been laid off, forgotten, left behind. I'd create a place where those people could work on meaningful projects, not just for profit, but for communities. Tech with purpose. Devices, infrastructure, whatever is needed, but with a foundation of empathy. A company where kindness isn't a weakness, but a strength. Elon tilted his head. That's rare. I know, she said. But I also know it's possible. He nodded slowly, then stood up and walked to the whiteboard. Most people don't realize how fragile systems are, he said. Tech, supply chains, society. One bad week and the whole thing falls apart. You seem to understand that. She watched as he erased a section of equations and wrote 2 words in block letters, build forward. He turned back to her. I can't promise you a job. But I can give you a chance. Her heart stopped. What kind of chance? He returned to the table and opened a small folder, sliding it toward her. This is a microgrant. $50,000. No strings. Use it to build something. Show me. Show the world. If it works, we'll talk again. Emma stared at the folder. Why me? He smiled slightly. Because you asked nothing and believed in something. That's rarer than talent. She swallowed hard. I won't waste it. Good, he said, standing. Then go build something worth building. The meeting ended there. No red tape. No drawn-out contracts. Just a quiet agreement and a decision that would change everything. When Emma returned to her hotel room, she locked the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and cried. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming release of something she hadn't felt in years, possibility. She called Sandra, who screamed so loudly she had to pull the phone away from her ear. She called Leo next, who asked if they were rich now and if he could get a telescope. She laughed and said, not rich, buddy. But maybe, on our way to something better. Over the next week, Emma didn't sleep much. She drafted plans, made spreadsheets, called old colleagues she hadn't spoken to in years. Some were skeptical. Others were intrigued. One by one, they started saying yes. Yes to brainstorming. Yes to meetings. Yes to building. They decided to call the project Heartforge, a place where tech was built with compassion, where every design started with the question, who will this help? They rented a tiny warehouse near Gardena and filled it with second-hand desks, loaner laptops, and cardboard boxes labeled with scribbled hopes. Emma's team was small at first, just 4 people. 2 engineers, 1 coder, and a guy who used to manage logistics for a drone startup. They were misfits, laid-off dreamers, parents, burnout survivors. But they believed in the mission. And they believed in her. They started by building simple tech kits for underfunded schools, DIY solar chargers, recycled desktop units, low-cost air filters for classrooms with poor ventilation. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was real. Tangible. Needed. Emma worked 16-hour days, often stopping only to video call Leo and hear about his school projects. Every night, she stared at the ceiling and wondered if she was doing enough. If she was doing it right. If she could pull this off. But every morning, she got up and did it again. Because she remembered what it felt like to be 12 years old and alone and building rockets from cereal boxes. She remembered how it felt to be ignored. And she never wanted anyone on her team, or any kid they helped, to feel that way again. One night, After the warehouse lights had dimmed and her team had gone home, Emma stayed behind. She walked through the rows of tables, the half-finished prototypes, the scribbled whiteboards. She looked at what they were building. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe this wasn't just about survival anymore. Maybe this was the beginning of something extraordinary. Maybe kindness really could be the foundation of innovation. And maybe, just maybe, Elon Musk had seen something in her that she had forgotten how to see in herself. 3 weeks into launching HeartForge, Emma Carter was living entirely on caffeine, post-it notes, and adrenaline. The warehouse buzzed from sunrise to midnight with the low hum of soldering irons, the staccato clack of keyboards, and the sound of her team bouncing ideas like ping-pong balls between half-built workstations. She hadn't seen this kind of passion since her early years in aerospace. Only now, it wasn't about million-dollar payloads or orbital velocity, it was about people. It was about solving small, immediate problems with real-world impact. Their first big win came faster than she expected. A local news outlet picked up a tweet from one of the teachers using their solar-powered classroom charging station. Within days, HeartForge's inbox was flooded with requests from schools across the country, Detroit, Phoenix, rural Kentucky, inner-city Baltimore, all asking the same question, can we get one too? Emma sat in the break room, really just a corner of the warehouse with a microwave and a folding table, reading through the messages on her tablet. We're onto something, she whispered to herself. By now, her team had grown to 9. A systems engineer from her old company named Raj, who had once been passed over for promotion because he was too quiet in meetings. Tessa, a coder who'd left Silicon Valley after a startup imploded and took her self-worth with it. Isaiah, a former Marine who was teaching himself 3D printing on YouTube and had a knack for finding workarounds nobody else could see. They weren't the brightest stars in tech by corporate standards, but to Emma, they were exactly what innovation needed, raw, real, and relentless. On a Wednesday morning just after 7 a.m., while Emma was pouring powdered creamer into her coffee, her phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, then saw the short text, still building. M. Her heart skipped. Elon. She hadn't heard from him since their meeting. She thought maybe the grant had been a one-time gesture, a spark tossed into the wind. But now, 3 letters brought everything rushing back. She typed back, always. Want to see? Within minutes, she had a reply, tomorrow, noon. She didn't even have to ask where. The next 24 hours were a storm. She briefed the team, cleaned the floors, organized every corner of the space, and made sure their most promising prototypes were on full display. She didn't want to impress him with polish. She wanted him to see potential. At 11:55 a.m. a Tesla Model X pulled up outside the warehouse. No entourage. No press. Just Elon Musk, in a black t-shirt and jeans, stepping into their world like a curious professor visiting a student's garage lab. Smells like ambition in here, he said with a half-smile. Emma grinned. We bottle it and sell it by the liter. She gave him the tour herself, walking him through their solar charging kits, their water purification prototype for disaster zones, and a low-cost, modular tablet made from recycled e-waste that had already been piloted in 2 after-school programs. He asked sharp questions, fast and precise, sometimes challenging, always curious. The rest of the team watched from a respectful distance, occasionally chiming in when Emma waved them over. For an hour, the place felt electric. When the tour ended, Elon leaned against a workbench covered in soldering tools and said, "You built all this from $50,000. And a lot of donated pizza," she said. "But yeah." He studied her. "You could go commercial. Get investors. Scale this fast. Ever think about that?" Emma took a breath. "I have. But that's not the point of HeartForge. We're not trying to be the next unicorn. We're trying to make a different kind of impact. Smaller, maybe. But deeper. Impact scales too, he said. If you're smart about it. I don't want to compromise on values just to move faster, she replied. This place is built on kindness. On second chances. On giving people a place to matter. Elon looked around. And it shows. But eventually, you'll need to grow. And when that time comes, kindness has to be baked into the business model, not just the culture. Emma nodded slowly. You think it's possible? I think, he said, straightening up, that most people underestimate the ROI of doing the right thing. She smiled. We should put that on a mug. He laughed, and for a moment, the room felt less like a startup and more like a conversation between two builders trying to solve the same riddle from different ends of the equation. Before he left, he handed her a business card with a handwritten note on the back. You've got 2 rockets now. Make sure they both take off. She didn't know what it meant, exactly, but she felt the weight of it in her chest. After he left, the team gathered around her, buzzing with questions. So, what now? Raj asked. Emma looked around at them, their faces tired but bright, hands still stained with solder, eyes burning with the kind of fire you don't learn in school. Now, she said, we keep going. Over the next month, Heartforge exploded. Not in fire and metal, but in attention and opportunity. The media latched onto their story, a single mom, former engineer, kindness as a strategy startup with a billionaire backer. Interviews poured in. NPR. Wired. TechCrunch. School districts started calling with purchase orders. Then came the nonprofits. Disaster relief agencies. Even an international NGO reached out about deploying their water filters in refugee camps. Emma was thrilled. Terrified. Exhausted. She started sleeping on the office couch. She missed Leo more than she could put into words. Sandra stepped up, helping with homework and bedtime and sending her videos of Leo doing rocket impressions or singing badly off-key just to make her smile. But Emma felt torn in two, half of her chasing this dream, the other half aching for her son. One night, after a long meeting with a potential partner, she sat alone in the dark warehouse and opened her laptop. She clicked on a folder she hadn't touched in months, the one labeled Letters to Leo. She opened a new file and typed, Tonight, I missed your laugh so much I could hear it in the silence. I want you to know I'm not just building things. I'm building a world where you'll never have to wonder if kindness is enough. I'm building so you can believe in people again. She saved it and closed her eyes. 2 days later, she flew home for the weekend. When Leo saw her at the gate, he ran into her arms with the force of a rocket launch. Did you bring me a moon rock? He asked. She pulled a small polished stone from her pocket. Nope. I brought you a kindness rock. Way rarer. That night, they watched the stars from a blanket in the backyard, Leo curled beside her, pointing out constellations he only half remembered. Emma stared up at the same sky her father had once shown her, thinking about how loss had shaped her but hadn't defined her. How every heartbreak had bent her, but not broken her. How kindness had found a way to rebuild what the world tried to take. And in that moment, under the open sky with her son's hand in hers, she realized something quietly profound. Elon Musk hadn't changed her life with money. He'd changed it with belief. He'd answered a whisper with a door. He'd reminded her. And maybe the world, that sometimes, the greatest force in the universe isn't gravity or innovation or wealth. It's simply seeing someone when they think they're invisible. And choosing, without reason or reward, to lift them up. By the time fall rolled in, Heartforge had become something Emma could barely recognize, but in the best way. The warehouse had doubled in size, thanks to a donation from a venture philanthropy fund impressed by their impact metrics. New workstations had been installed, the team had grown to over 30 members, and they had built a small logistics wing to handle the growing number of orders coming from schools, hospitals, and disaster relief organizations. Their mission remained the same, create practical tech rooted in compassion. But everything around that mission was changing at lightning speed. Emma, once tucked quietly behind a soldering station, now found herself leading all-hands meetings, sitting in on high-level strategy calls, and answering emails that began with, "Dear Ms. Carter." They had hired a communications specialist, mostly because Emma hated public speaking and didn't want to end up becoming a full-time spokesperson instead of an engineer. But no matter how much her role evolved, she kept one thing consistent: every week, she carved out time to sit with the interns and junior engineers, just to listen. Not manage. Not direct. Just listen. Because she remembered what it felt like to be unheard. It was one of those listening sessions when she met Alicia, a quiet young woman who wore oversized hoodies and kept her eyes on her shoes when she talked. She had been referred to HeartForge through a local nonprofit that helped train underrepresented youth in STEM. When Emma asked her what she wanted to do long-term, Alicia shrugged. "I dunno. Make stuff that doesn't break people." That answer stuck with Emma for days. Make stuff that doesn't break people. She started writing it on sticky notes. She mentioned it in an investor call. She even scrawled it on the whiteboard in the conference room. Because the truth was, most of the world's tech wasn't built with people in mind. It was built for profit, for scale, for disruption. And Emma was tired of disruption. She wanted restoration. One Thursday morning, as Emma was reviewing a new prototype for a modular battery unit that could be deployed in remote villages, she got a call from Elise, the same program manager who'd greeted her months ago at SpaceX. "He wants to see you," Elise said. "Today. 4 o'clock. Are you available?" Emma didn't hesitate. "Yes." She hung up and immediately told her team she'd be out for a few hours. She didn't tell them why. She didn't want the pressure. She just grabbed her notepad, pulled her braid tighter, and called a car. When she arrived at the SpaceX office, the receptionist recognized her and waved her through without asking for ID. That surprised her. She wasn't used to being expected. Elon met her in a small meeting room that smelled like whiteboard markers and burnt coffee. "Thanks for coming," he said. "I've been following HeartForge. Impressive growth." "We're doing our best," she said. "No one expects kindness to scale, but it does." He nodded. "That's why I called you." He motioned for her to sit. "I've been thinking about something. A partnership. Not an acquisition. A collaborative build." Emma narrowed her eyes. "Of what?" He stood and moved to the whiteboard, starting to sketch while he talked. "Imagine this. A low-cost, portable infrastructure system. Solar-powered. Includes internet, communication, water filtration, power storage, even basic medical diagnostics. Something you can airdrop into a disaster zone or a rural village and have up and running in hours." She watched the drawing take shape. "Like a tech shelter?" "Exactly," he said. "We've got the engineering muscle, the resources, and the scale. But what we don't have is your angle, human-first design. If you built it, people would trust it. And that trust could save lives." Emma leaned back, thinking. Her brain raced through logistics, materials, field testing, failure points. "We'd need to pilot it," she said. "Start small." "Of course," he replied. "I'll fund the prototype. You lead the design. Your brand. Your team. But I want to help." She looked at him. "Why?" He paused. "Because too many people think the future is only for the powerful. I want to prove them wrong." That answer landed like a stone in her chest. For the first time, she saw beyond the headlines and the bravado. She saw a man who believed, like she did, that the world didn't have to leave people behind. "All right," she said. "Let's build it." When she returned to the warehouse, she called an emergency team meeting. Everyone thought something was wrong. She stood at the front, holding a marker, heart pounding. "We've got a new project," she said. "And it's big." She explained the concept: tech shelters, rapid deploy systems, scalable humanitarian support. "We're calling it Project Ember," she announced. "Because even in ashes, something can still ignite." The team burst into applause. Over the next few weeks, Project Ember became the beating heart of HeartForge. Every division had a hand in it: power systems, water purification, communications, structural design. They brought in volunteers from universities, independent contractors, even retired engineers who wanted to contribute. It felt like building a moon base for Earth. One night, around 2 a.m., Emma sat alone at her desk reviewing schematics. Her eyes were bloodshot, her coffee long cold. She opened her laptop and typed a new letter to Leo. "Someday, when you're older," she wrote, "you'll ask me why I was gone so much this year. And I'll tell you it's because I was trying to build something that could bring families back together. I missed you so I could help someone else not have to miss their mom. I hope you'll understand that was never a sacrifice. It was a promise." The first prototype of Project Ember was completed by mid-December. A sleek, modular unit that could be packed into a shipping crate and assembled by 3 people in under 4 hours. It had solar panels, a satellite link, a water filtration system, and a fold-out medical station with basic diagnostics powered by AI. It wasn't perfect. But it worked. They tested it in the Mojave Desert, and when it powered on for the first time and started running clean water through the filtration system, Emma felt her knees go weak. They'd done it. HeartForge posted a video of the test online, and within a day, it had over 1 million views. The UN reached out. A major disaster relief nonprofit requested immediate deployment of 3 units. And then, late one night, Emma got a message from Elon: "You proved it can be done. Now let's build 100. She replied, "Let's build 1,000. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she was dreaming too big. She felt like she was finally dreaming exactly the right size. As the year drew to a close, Emma stood in the middle of the HeartForge warehouse watching her team finish the final prep on the Ember units for their first international deployment. Around her, people were laughing, running tests, packing crates, double-checking instructions translated into 7 languages. It looked nothing like the tiny startup they had been a few months ago. But it felt exactly the same. Real. Grounded. Fierce in its goodness. She thought about her father. About how he once told her she would build something that changed the world. She thought about her mother, about loss, about the long nights where kindness felt like weakness. She thought about the little girl she had once been, angry, scared, alone, clutching broken radios and dreaming of rockets. And then she thought about Leo. About the future. About how, in the end, kindness wasn't soft. It was steel. It was circuitry. It was revolution, wrapped in grace. And she knew, with every beat of her heart, that they were just getting started. The deployment of the first 10 Ember units to Central America marked a defining moment not only for HeartForge but for Emma Carter personally. Each Ember unit had been flown in through a partnership with an international relief agency and delivered to communities devastated by back-to-back hurricanes. The goal wasn't to fix everything, it was to stabilize, to offer light where there had been darkness, to filter drinking water where rivers had turned toxic, to provide communication where families had gone silent. Emma didn't go on the first trip. She wanted to, she ached to, but she knew her role was to stay behind, to lead, to make sure the systems kept moving. Instead, Raj and Tessa traveled with the crew, documenting every setup, every problem, every person whose eyes lit up when they saw a machine deliver clean water in a plastic jug or power up a phone to call a sister they hadn't spoken to in weeks. The footage came in over a shaky satellite link. Emma sat alone in the warehouse break room at 3 a.m., huddled over her laptop, watching as the Ember units unfolded like metallic butterflies in the dust, workers hauling crates through mud, kids peeking into the medical console and waving at the infrared thermometer. One clip showed an elderly man standing near the power panel, tears running down his cheeks as lights flickered on inside a tent that had been his family's only shelter for over a month. He didn't speak English, but he spoke into the camera, and the translator's voice overlaid, "You don't know what this means to us. We thought no one remembered we were here." Emma turned off the video and sat in silence, her hand over her mouth, tears welling. She didn't know how to explain the feeling rising in her chest, this mixture of triumph and humility, of overwhelming gratitude and sobering responsibility. This wasn't just a proof of concept anymore. This was real. These were lives. These were promises kept. The press caught wind of the deployments, and within days HeartForge was everywhere, featured on tech blogs, humanitarian columns, even evening news segments that normally stuck to politics and celebrity scandals. Emma was invited to speak on a panel at a major technology summit in San Francisco. At first, she almost turned it down. She hated crowds. She didn't enjoy the spotlight. But Sandra told her, sometimes the story isn't for you. Sometimes it's for the little girl who thinks no one's listening. Emma flew out on a Friday, wearing a blazer she borrowed from a friend and the same boots she wore to her first engineering internship. The panel featured startup founders, climate tech experts, and one venture capitalist who kept dropping buzzwords like impact synergy and disruption leverage. When it was Emma's turn to speak, she ignored the script her communications lead had drafted and said, "We didn't build Ember to change the world. We built it because the world was already changing, and too many people were being left behind. Technology has power, but compassion gives it direction. You can't 3D print trust. You earn it, person by person, solution by solution." The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows truth. She wasn't polished. She wasn't theatrical. But she was honest. After the panel, people lined up to talk to her, engineers, students, executives. One man handed her a card and said his foundation wanted to fund their next 20 Ember units. Another offered office space in Singapore. A third simply said, "Thank you. My sister lives in Honduras. She told me about what you built." She said it felt like hope had an engine. On the flight home, Emma stared out the window, the lights of cities blurring below, and thought about the weight of hope. How fragile it was. How vital. How easily it could be ignored in favor of profits or efficiency or fear. But also, how it could be amplified by a single act of kindness, by a single decision to show up for someone else. Back at HeartForge, things were moving fast. They were onboarding 5 new engineers, expanding their logistics team, and building partnerships with disaster response organizations across 3 continents. There were days Emma barely had time to eat, to sleep, to breathe. She missed Leo with a fierceness that surprised her, and on particularly long nights, she would call just to hear him talk about science class or the weird shape of a new cloud he saw. He didn't always understand what she was doing, but he always ended the call with, "I'm proud of you, Mom." That was enough. That was everything. One evening, she came back to her desk after a 2-hour strategy session to find a small envelope tucked under her keyboard. It had no name on it, just the word "remember." Inside was a note written in Alicia's looping handwriting, "Make stuff that doesn't break people. You're doing it. Keep going." Emma didn't cry right away. She just stared at the note, holding it like it was made of glass, and then tucked it into her wallet next to an old photo of her and Leo at a science museum, both of them in matching NASA hats. Weeks passed. Orders grew. Teams expanded. But not everything was easy. A major shipment of Ember parts got stuck in customs for 10 days, delaying an urgent deployment. One of their beta software updates crashed during a field test. A donor pulled out over concerns about scale and ROI. Through it all, Emma tried to lead with clarity, with steadiness, but also with vulnerability. She told the team when she didn't have answers. She apologized when she made the wrong call. And in return, the team showed her something rare, unshakable trust. One morning, as Emma was finishing her second coffee, Elon called. No assistant, no agenda, just his voice on the other end. I've been watching the Ember rollouts, he said. It's more than I imagined. It's more than I imagined too, she replied. You've made it clear that kindness can be infrastructure. Funny, he said. Most people still think it's just a feeling. She laughed. It's a force. I agree, he said. And forces move things. He paused. There's something else I've been thinking about. Something bigger. A multi-country partnership. Energy, connectivity, disaster response. I want you to lead the humanitarian tech arm. Emma's heart froze. Me? You've already proven you can lead with purpose. Now I want to see what you can do with reach. She didn't answer right away. She thought about Leo. About the long nights and the missed dinners. About the people she wanted to serve. About the choice she made months ago to bet everything on an idea rooted in softness and strength. Finally, she said, let me talk to my team. If I do this, I want them in it too. Of course, he said. Call me when you're ready. That night, Emma stood on the roof of the Heartforge building, staring at the stars. The city was alive below her, sirens, horns, laughter, 1,000 lives in motion. She thought about her journey. About the woman who once lost everything. About the tweet that changed everything. About how Elon Musk's unexpected advice wasn't really about tech or startups or scale. It was about choosing to believe that kindness mattered in a world that often forgot it did. It was about choosing to rebuild not just what had been lost, but what had never been fully built in the first place, a world where compassion wasn't a side note, but the blueprint. A world where strength and softness could coexist. A world where hope had teeth and gears and circuitry. Emma closed her eyes and whispered to the sky, I'm ready. And somewhere in that vast dark, the universe whispered back. Emma didn't sleep that night after talking to Elon. The offer looped in her head like a siren call, lead the humanitarian tech arm of a multi-country partnership with resources beyond anything Heartforge could access on its own. But with that power came questions, responsibilities, risks. What would it mean for Heartforge's independence? Could they stay true to their mission with the weight of government interests and international contracts hanging over them? She spent the early morning hours pacing the warehouse floor, the only sounds the soft buzz of security lights and the occasional hum of a fridge kicking on in the break room. She thought about all the promises she had made, not just to Leo, but to her team, to herself, to the people they were trying to help. Around 6 a.m., she sent a message to her leadership team, emergency meeting at 8. By 7:45, they were filing into the conference room with paper cups of coffee and curious expressions. Raj leaned against the whiteboard, Tessa scrolled through emails, Isaiah tossed an energy bar into the air and caught it without looking. What's up? He asked. Emma stood at the head of the table, exhausted but clear-eyed. I got a call last night from Elon. That got their attention. Everyone stopped moving. He wants Heartforge to lead the humanitarian tech division of a global infrastructure initiative, energy, communication, rapid deployment support, and more. We'd be at the center of it. Not swallowed up, not absorbed. But leading. Guiding the mission. Tessa raised an eyebrow. And the catch? Scale, Emma said. We'd be operating at a completely different level. More eyes. More scrutiny. More red tape. And more pressure to move faster than ever. Raj asked the question she hadn't dared say out loud yet. Would we still be Heartforge? Silence settled over the room. Emma took a breath. I think we can be. But it will take more than belief. It will take discipline, clarity, and constant commitment to why we started in the first place. We'll have to protect the culture we built here like it's our most valuable product. Because it is. Isaiah finally spoke. So, what do we vote on? Whether we go big or stay small. Not small, Emma said. Focused. We've made impact without needing headlines. We've changed lives without scale. But if we say yes to this, we're saying we're ready to do both. Tessa looked around the room. I say we try. And if it doesn't work, we recalibrate. That's what we've always done. Raj nodded slowly. I want in. But only if we set non-negotiables now. No mission drift. No compromises on who we hire or how we design. One by one, the team spoke. They weren't unanimous in their comfort, but they were united in their trust. And when Emma asked for a final show of hands, every arm lifted. She called Elon that afternoon and said simply, "We're in." The weeks that followed were a storm of activity. Legal agreements, international calls, planning summits, and site visits. Emma found herself in meetings with UN officials, energy ministers, telecom executives. She wore more suits, spoke into more microphones, and flew in more airplanes than she had in the last decade combined. But she always came home to the warehouse. It was her grounding place. Her reminder of what all the charts and forecasts and acronyms actually meant. It meant Alicia's quiet fire. Raja's stubborn integrity. Isaiah's scrappy brilliance. And the photos tacked up on their community wall, smiling kids, grateful parents, ember units glowing in the night. The first major initiative of the partnership was called Operation Lighthouse. The goal was to place 30 ember-based infrastructure pods in regions with simultaneous humanitarian and climate challenges, coastal villages hit by rising sea levels, towns recovering from conflict, rural communities with no access to modern utilities. Emma traveled to Kenya for the first pilot installation. The village was called Maji Moto, and it had been struggling with drought, failing power grids, and healthcare shortages for years. When their ember unit arrived, the entire community came out to help unload the components. Children carried boxes half their size. Elders offered chairs and shade. Teenagers translated and asked questions about solar angles and water flow. Emma worked side by side with the team, sweating through her shirt, hands caked with dust, her hair pulled back tight. And when the lights flicked on for the first time, the cheer that erupted was louder than anything she'd ever heard in an auditorium. That night, as the villagers danced around a fire, Emma sat with the village matriarch, a woman named Wanjiku, who handed her a bowl of warm stew and asked her a single question: "Why did you come?" Emma paused. "Because I believe we owe each other more than silence when things break. I believe in repair." Wanjiku nodded slowly. "Then you belong here." Over the next year, Operation Lighthouse became a blueprint for ethical, scalable infrastructure solutions. Other countries joined. Other companies tried to replicate. But none could quite match the ethos Heartforge had embedded from day one, an ethos not of charity or saviorism, but of partnership and humility. Emma was invited to speak at the UN General Assembly, where she stood in front of world leaders and said, "Kindness is not soft. It is not weak. It is the strongest force I have ever known. Because it requires courage. It requires belief in something you cannot automate, human dignity." The applause lasted for minutes. After the speech, as she was leaving the building, she felt a tap on her shoulder. It was a young woman with a press badge and tears in her eyes. "I just wanted to say," she whispered, "I used to think no one saw people like me. But then I read about what you're doing. And now I know someone does." Emma smiled and said, "Then you go build something. I'll have your back." Not everything was smooth. There were critics who claimed she was idealistic, naive, too emotionally driven. There were logistical failures, delays, even one situation where a foreign government tried to repurpose an ember unit for military use. Emma responded by pulling all Heartforge assets out of the region until a full audit was completed. That decision cost them money and goodwill in some circles, but it preserved their values. And that, to Emma, was priceless. Back home, Leo was growing fast. He joined the school robotics club, started building mini drones in the garage, and talked endlessly about going to Mars one day. Emma made it home every other weekend now, and when she couldn't, she sent him letters, videos, and care packages full of little parts and notes like "everything starts with one wire." One night, as they watched a documentary about astronauts, Leo turned to her and said, "I want to build things that help people survive anywhere." "Like you do." She kissed his forehead. "Then you already know more than I did at your age." Eventually, Heartforge moved into a larger space, but they kept the original warehouse as their R&D lab. Emma refused to let it be sold or converted. "This is where we remembered who we are," she told a reporter. "It's our compass." One day, she walked into the old warehouse alone and found Alicia sitting at a bench, helping a new intern solder a prototype for a water turbine. Alicia looked up and grinned. "Full circle," she said. Emma walked over, leaned down, and whispered, "Never a circle. A spiral. We rise every time we return." As she walked back to her office that day, her phone buzzed. A text from Elon. Just 2 words, "Keep building." She replied, "Always." Because by then, Emma Carter knew that kindness wasn't just advice. It was a strategy. It was a blueprint. It was infrastructure. It was the most radical thing you could build in a world designed to forget. And she had only just begun. The momentum was undeniable. Operation Lighthouse had gone from an ambitious pilot to a globally recognized standard in humanitarian technology. Media outlets dubbed it the Compassion Grid, and international agencies began reorganizing their emergency response playbooks to include Heartforge-style infrastructure. Emma, though still unaccustomed to headlines, became a recognizable figure, not because she courted attention, but because her refusal to compromise had turned her into something rare, a tech leader with a conscience as sharp as her intellect. With every success came more invitations, more panels, more stakeholders asking her to weigh in on everything from rural electrification to climate migration policy. But beneath the surface of this newfound visibility, Emma sensed the strain it was placing on her team. Heartforge had grown fast. Too fast, maybe. New hires were onboarding weekly. Departments once handled by 3 people now required 15. What had started as a family was beginning to feel like a corporation. One night, long after the lights had gone out and the warehouse had emptied, Emma walked through the rows of workstations, running her hand over desks that had once been shared, over chairs still warm from the engineers who had just left. She stopped in front of the corkboard that held their first deployment photos, Ember unit standing proud in the middle of devastation, glowing with purpose. But now there were complaints about burnout. Tension between departments. Emails going unanswered. Small cracks, yes, but cracks nonetheless. She called an off-site. Not a conference. Not a strategy retreat. Just a space. She invited everyone, from engineers to janitorial staff, to a remote cabin compound 3 hours outside the city. There were no Wi-Fi passwords. No decks. No formal agenda. Just food, campfires, and a whiteboard with a single prompt: what do we need to protect to stay Heartforge? The first day was awkward. People didn't know if they should work or relax. But by the second night, something broke open. Tessa stood up during a group circle and said, "I'm scared we're going to become one of those companies that forget why it started. We're tired. We've done amazing things. But we're running too hot, and we never stop." Alicia added, "I miss knowing everyone's name. I miss celebrating the little wins. We used to cheer when a prototype lit up. Now we just send it up the chain." Emma didn't speak. She just listened. And what she heard was heartbreak. Not failure. Not dysfunction. But heartbreak. The ache of a team that loved its mission too much to watch it fade. She stayed up all night writing a new internal manifesto. Not a set of rules. A set of promises. We will never forget the people we serve. We will always build with, not for. We will never sacrifice clarity for speed. We will choose rest over burnout. We will believe that kindness is not a delay, it is design. The next morning, she stood on a picnic bench with a clipboard and read it out loud. And when she was done, the team didn't applaud. They stood. All of them. In silence. In agreement. They returned to the warehouse with renewed focus. Emma implemented a rotating sabbatical schedule. No one, not even leadership, was allowed to work 12 consecutive months without a break. The internal communication system was restructured so no email went more than 48 hours without a response. And every Monday morning now began with mission moments, short presentations by any team member, highlighting something small but meaningful they'd worked on. The culture didn't just recover. It thrived. Meanwhile, the next phase of the partnership with Elon's coalition was taking shape, solar corridors across drought-ravaged regions in Africa and Southeast Asia. The goal was to power medical centers, education hubs, and remote villages with clean energy, tethered together by Ember units that acted as energy and communication beacons. Emma insisted on one key principle: the design and implementation would be led by local engineers and community leaders. Heartforge's role would be to listen, to train, to support. Not to dictate. That wasn't always popular with investors. "We're slowing down innovation," one fund manager argued. "You're slowing down colonialism," Emma shot back. "And speeding up trust." Elon, to his credit, backed her. "If we lose the moral center, we lose everything," he said during a planning session. Emma felt the pressure every day. There were now over 200 people under her leadership, and every decision rippled across continents. But she kept herself grounded with a ritual she'd started years ago. Every Friday night, no matter what country she was in, she wrote a letter to Leo. Sometimes short. Sometimes long. Sometimes handwritten, sometimes typed. But always with the same sign-off: keep building. Love, Mom. One night, after delivering a keynote in Mumbai, she returned to her hotel to find a video message from him. He'd just finished a science fair where he'd built a small-scale version of an Ember unit using recycled parts. "They said I think like an engineer," he said, eyes shining. "But I told them, no, I think like a carter." Emma watched the video 4 times. Then 5. Then 10. When she finally slept, it was the deepest sleep she'd had in months. Not long after, tragedy struck. A powerful typhoon devastated a cluster of coastal towns in the Philippines. The damage was catastrophic: roads washed out, hospitals offline, entire communities displaced. Within hours, Heartforge was coordinating a response. They deployed 12 Ember units, and Emma insisted on joining the mission herself. For the first time in a while, she wore the same field boots she'd used during the original prototypes. The site was chaos. People scrambling for shelter, for food, for contact with lost loved ones. Emma and her team worked for 16 hours straight, reassembling pods, troubleshooting power systems, syncing communication uplinks. At one point, she was on her knees in ankle-deep water, elbow-deep in a power junction box, soaked and shaking from fatigue. A young girl approached her, maybe 9 or 10, barefoot and holding a melted flashlight. "Can you fix it?" she asked. Emma smiled. "Let's try." They sat together under the tarp while Emma rewired the light, her hands moving slowly but surely. When it flicked back on, the girl squealed with joy. "You're like a superhero," she said. Emma shook her head. "No. I just keep trying." That night, as they slept in shifts, someone handed her a note. It had been passed from a local leader through 3 translators and a volunteer. It said, simply, "What you build gives us time. And time gives us dignity. Thank you." Emma folded the note and tucked it beside Alicia's sticky note in her wallet. When the mission ended, and the teams rotated back to headquarters, Emma gave an address to the entire organization. She spoke over a simple video feed, her voice steady but raw. Kindness is not just our origin. It is our scale. It is our edge. It is our armor. And I believe it is our legacy. Never let anyone talk you out of it. Applause erupted from warehouses and offices in 8 countries. And that's when it happened. A message came through from a global education nonprofit that had been distributing Heart4 Gember units to schools in remote locations. They had connected 2 units across a mountain range using low-orbit satellite relays. For the first time, children on opposite sides of the country could attend the same virtual classroom. In the first test, a boy in Nepal read a poem to a girl in Bhutan. She clapped. He bowed. And the network held. Emma watched the footage alone, silent, her throat tight. Because in that moment, she understood something that had eluded her for years. Kindness wasn't the opposite of innovation. It was its evolution. It was the version of progress that didn't leave people behind. The future wasn't built on steel and code alone. It was built on the decision to care, again and again, no matter how hard, no matter how slow. The future was ember, glowing in the dark, reaching across borders, across languages, across lives. And Emma Carter, once a quiet girl with broken radios and a heart full of ache, had become its architect. Not with ego. Not with fame. But with fire. And kindness. Always, with kindness. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Emma's growing prominence brought unexpected challenges. With every accolade, every milestone, the pressure to perform increased. Investors demanded quarterly growth reports, international partners expected swift decisions, and the media scrutinized every move. Yet, beneath the polished exterior, Emma felt an undercurrent of isolation. The very kindness she championed sometimes made her feel vulnerable in the ruthless corridors of power. One evening after a particularly grueling day of back-to-back meetings in Washington, D.C., she found herself wandering aimlessly through a nearby park, the cold spring air heavy with the scent of blooming jasmine. Her phone buzzed, another call from Elon. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Emma, Elon's voice came clear, calm, you're carrying the world on your shoulders. Remember, kindness is strength, but it doesn't mean carrying every burden alone. She sighed, easy to say when you're Elon Musk. He chuckled softly, maybe, but I'm telling you this because I've been there. You have to build a team that shares not just your mission, but your heart. Trust them. Let them lift you. The next morning, Emma convened a meeting with her executive team. She confessed her fatigue and admitted that she had been trying to manage too much herself. We've built something incredible, she said, but it can only survive if we share the weight. If kindness is the blueprint, then trust is the foundation. She tasked Raj and Tessa with leading an internal delegation program, designed to empower middle managers to make decisions and lead projects independently. This was a culture shift. Some resisted, fearing loss of control or quality. But Emma remained firm, control is an illusion. We choose connection and collaboration instead. Around the same time, Leo was preparing for high school. He wanted to study engineering, of course, but also something unexpected, philosophy. To understand why people do what they do, he explained one evening over dinner. Emma smiled. The boy was growing in his own way, just as she had hoped. As heart-forged projects expanded, new partnerships emerged, some promising, others complicated. One notable collaboration was with a large multinational corporation known for its questionable environmental record. The offer came wrapped in impressive funding but carried the risk of public backlash. Emma spent hours debating the ethics, consulting advisors, and calling Elon for perspective. He reminded her bluntly, every partnership is a negotiation between ideals and realities. The question is whether you can steer the ship without losing your compass. After deep reflection and dialogue with her team, Emma agreed to a pilot program that enforced rigorous environmental safeguards and community-led oversight. The pilot was transparent, open to audits, and aimed to transform not just infrastructure but corporate culture. The initial results were mixed. While the funding accelerated deployment, some community members felt wary, suspicious of motives. Emma prioritized listening sessions, inviting critics and advocates alike to speak openly. One memorable conversation was with a young activist named Marisol, who accused HeartForge of selling out. Emma did not respond defensively. Instead, she acknowledged the pain and skepticism and promised ongoing accountability. This humility, rare in corporate politics, helped bridge gaps and rebuild trust. Meanwhile, HeartForge's technology evolved. The Ember units incorporated AI-driven predictive maintenance, reducing downtime. New modular attachments allowed for water purification, agricultural sensors, and emergency medical support. Emma's favorite feature was the Kindness Beacon, a communication platform encouraging local acts of help and solidarity, broadcasting messages of hope and support. One particularly poignant moment came during a flood in Bangladesh. An Ember unit's beacon picked up a distress signal from a stranded family. Thanks to HeartForge's network, volunteers nearby coordinated a rescue, saving lives in the process. Emma received a call from the family's patriarch, who said simply, "Your light saved us." Those words became a mantra. But challenges were never far behind. In Europe, a cyber attack targeted HeartForge's infrastructure, attempting to disable communications in several vulnerable zones. The breach was sophisticated and unnerving. Emma convened an emergency task force, including cybersecurity experts, engineers, and legal counsel. They worked tirelessly for days, restoring systems and fortifying defenses. The attack underscored the fragile balance between technology's promise and peril. Emma realized that kindness alone wouldn't protect their work, it had to be paired with vigilance and resilience. The experience deepened her resolve to build not just systems but communities capable of weathering crises. On a personal front, Leo's questions about the world became more complex. He challenged her on climate politics, economic inequality, and ethical leadership. Their conversations often stretched late into the night, sometimes ending in friendly debates, other times with thoughtful silences. Emma cherished these moments, seeing in her son the seeds of the future she hoped to nurture. One spring afternoon, Emma visited a HeartForge installation in rural Appalachia. The community had been devastated by economic decline and environmental damage. Yet, the Ember unit had sparked renewal, lighting up a local clinic, powering internet access for schools, and enabling remote job training programs. Residents greeted her warmly, sharing stories of hope and resilience. A young teacher named Daniel said, "You don't just bring machines. You bring belief that we can rebuild." Emma felt a profound connection there, a reminder that kindness wasn't abstract, it was tangible, measured in light, warmth, and human dignity. The work was exhausting, exhilarating, and sometimes heartbreaking. But Emma's mantra remained, "Keep building. Love, Mom." She pinned that phrase on her office wall, alongside a photo of Leo grinning with a wrench in his hand. One night, alone in her office, Emma opened a package. Inside was a small, hand-carved wooden box with a note, "From someone who believes in what you do." Inside the box was a simple compass, its needle steady and true. Emma held it tightly and whispered, "Kindness is my compass." She thought of Elon's advice, the unexpected gift that had changed everything, and felt a wave of gratitude. The journey was far from over. New challenges, new horizons awaited. But Emma Carter was ready. Because in kindness, she had found not just a strategy, but a revolution. The morning air was thick with anticipation as Emma prepared for what might be the most critical phase of HeartForge's mission yet, integrating Ember units into a sprawling refugee camp on the Turkey-Syria border. The camp housed tens of thousands fleeing violence and uncertainty, living in conditions that tested the limits of human endurance. For Emma, this was more than an engineering challenge, it was a test of everything she and her team had built. As the convoy rolled into the camp, dust kicked up around the vehicles and children peeked curiously from behind makeshift tents. The hum of conversations in dozens of languages filled the air, a chaotic but vibrant tapestry of hope and fear. Emma's team worked quickly, setting up the Ember units to provide electricity for water purification systems, medical stations, and communication hubs that connected families separated by conflict. The camp's local leaders were skeptical at first, wary of outsiders bearing technology that might not last or respect their autonomy. Emma knew skepticism was healthy, a necessary guard against exploitation. She spent long hours sitting with elders and youth leaders, listening more than speaking, learning about their needs and fears. One afternoon, a teenage girl named Layla approached her. She carried a worn notebook filled with sketches and notes about solar panels and circuitry. "I want to learn," Layla said quietly. "Can you teach me?" Emma's heart lifted. This was the ripple effect she had hoped for, kindness sparking empowerment. She arranged for Layla to join the Heartforge training workshops, pairing her with an engineer from the team who spoke Arabic. Days turned into weeks. Slowly, the Ember units became more than machines, they became symbols of resilience. Layla began repairing minor faults on her own and helped train others, becoming a beacon of hope in a place where despair often reigned. But challenges mounted. Political tensions flared as external forces pushed for control over the camp's resources. Rumors spread about sabotage and theft. Emma found herself navigating a complex web of alliances, constantly balancing transparency with discretion to protect the community. One night, a major storm swept through the camp, flooding sections and damaging critical infrastructure. Emergency repairs were frantic. Emma worked side by side with volunteers, soaked to the bone but unyielding. As dawn broke, she saw Layla and a group of young volunteers restoring solar arrays, their determination undimmed by exhaustion. In that moment, Emma realized that kindness had seeded something far greater than technology. It had built a network of human connection stronger than any machine. Yet, even as the project stabilized, Emma felt the weight of responsibility pressing harder. The media spotlight intensified, and with it came scrutiny and criticism. Some accused Heartforge of political interference, others questioned the sustainability of their work. In public forums, Emma faced tough questions. She learned to answer not with defensiveness but with honesty, acknowledging mistakes and emphasizing lessons learned. Behind closed doors, she reinforced the culture of kindness within her team, reminding everyone that external pressure was a test, not a threat. Meanwhile, Elon reached out again with an invitation to join a new initiative focused on space-based renewable energy. The project promised to revolutionize access to clean power globally, but required a leap into uncharted technical and financial territory. Emma wrestled with the decision. Accepting would mean diverting focus from ongoing ground operations and stretching Heartforge's resources thin. But declining could mean missing a once-in-a-generation opportunity. She called Leo for advice. His response was simple but profound: kindness means knowing when to say yes and when to say no. It means protecting your heart so you can keep giving. With that clarity, Emma negotiated a partnership that allowed Heartforge to contribute specialized technology without losing autonomy or mission focus. The collaboration flourished, leading to breakthroughs that would soon power remote regions on Earth and beyond. Back in the field, Emma's relationship with Layla deepened into mentorship and friendship. They shared stories of dreams and fears, bridging generations and cultures. Layla confided her hopes of one day returning home to rebuild with the skills she had gained. Emma knew that such dreams were fragile but necessary. It was kindness, patient, persistent kindness, that could nurture them into reality. As the year closed, Heartforge celebrated milestones but also mourned losses. A devastating earthquake in a South American country challenged their systems and resolve. Despite rapid response, lives were lost, and infrastructure destroyed. Emma visited the affected regions, holding hands with survivors, offering words of comfort that sometimes felt hollow against the scale of grief. In quiet moments, she questioned whether kindness alone was enough. But then she remembered Elon's words, the compass she carried: kindness is strength, not weakness. It was the seed from which resilience, innovation, and hope could grow. Emma redoubled efforts to improve disaster response capabilities, integrating lessons learned with humility and urgency. The organization emerged stronger and more adaptive. Looking back over the journey, Emma marveled at how far they had come, from a small team with a fragile idea to a global movement powered by kindness and courage. She realized that the true impact was not measured in units deployed or dollars raised but in lives touched and hearts changed. One evening, as she sat alone in her office reviewing reports, her phone rang. It was Elon. "I've been thinking," he said, "about the advice I gave you when we first met. I want to share something new. Kindness isn't just about what you give, it's about what you protect. Protect your values. Protect your people. Protect your joy. Because without those, the work means nothing." Emma smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the lights around her. She responded, "Thank you, Elon. For everything." And as she looked out the window at the city skyline, aglow with ember light, she knew the journey would continue, guided by kindness, resilience, and the quiet power of a heart determined to build a better world. The early morning light spilled softly through the window of Emma's modest home office as she prepared for an unexpected visit. The knock on her door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone until later that week. When she opened it, she found an older man standing there with kind eyes and a weathered smile. "Hello, Emma. I'm David Larson. I've followed your work with Heartforge for years." His voice carried a calm authority, the tone of someone who had lived through storms and still stood strong. Emma invited him inside, curiosity stirring within her. David was a retired engineer and humanitarian who had spent decades in some of the most dangerous zones on Earth, working on grassroots projects that combined technology with deep cultural understanding. Over coffee, he shared stories of his early days, of failures and small victories, and the crucial lesson that no technology, no matter how brilliant, could succeed without genuine kindness and respect for those it served. Emma listened intently, feeling a profound connection to his wisdom and humility. It reminded her of the foundation Elon had helped her find years ago. David proposed a collaboration that surprised her, to work together on a pilot program in the forgotten corners of the Amazon rainforest, where indigenous communities struggled not just with connectivity but with preserving their cultural heritage in the face of encroaching deforestation and climate change. The challenge was daunting. The terrain was unforgiving, the infrastructure nearly non-existent, and the political landscape fraught with corruption and exploitation. Yet the opportunity to blend Heartforge's Ember technology with David's deep community ties promised something unique, a project rooted in kindness as much as innovation. Emma felt the weight of this new venture but also a spark of excitement. They began planning immediately, assembling a team that included linguists, environmental scientists, and local leaders. The goal was not only to provide power and communication but to create a living archive, a digital library of stories, traditions, and knowledge preserved and shared through the Ember units. As they prepared for deployment, Emma reflected on how far she had come from the girl who once repaired radios alone in her room. Now, she was leading an international effort to safeguard cultures on the brink of disappearance, guided by kindness and the unexpected advice of a man who had long understood its power. The journey into the Amazon was grueling. Dense foliage, unpredictable weather, and logistical nightmares tested the team's resolve. Yet, every obstacle only deepened their commitment. They arrived at the first village to find skepticism replaced by cautious hope as locals saw the Ember units light up their communal spaces for the first time. Emma spent long hours sitting with elders, learning about sacred rituals and listening to stories passed down through generations. Layla, now a vital part of the team, translated and helped train young villagers to operate and maintain the units. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the canopy, Emma joined a circle of storytellers around a fire. A shaman spoke of balance, between nature and progress, between giving and taking. Emma realized this was the embodiment of the kindness Elon had described, not just a feeling but a profound respect for the interconnectedness of all things. The digital archive began taking shape, capturing songs, legends, medicinal knowledge, and language that might otherwise be lost. It was a reminder that technology could be a tool of preservation rather than erasure when wielded with care. But the project was not without its tensions. Political interests in the region saw the initiative as a threat to their exploitative agendas. There were attempts to block supplies, misinformation campaigns, and subtle intimidation. Emma and David navigated these challenges with transparency and unwavering commitment to the community's needs. They refused to let external pressures derail the mission. Over months, the Amazon project became a beacon, drawing attention from global environmentalists and human rights advocates. Emma found herself speaking at conferences, advocating not just for technology but for kindness as a core principle in every endeavor. She realized that her leadership was no longer just about managing projects but about inspiring a movement that valued empathy as much as efficiency. Meanwhile, back at HeartForge's headquarters, the culture Emma had fought so hard to cultivate continued to evolve. Raj and Tessa's delegation program flourished, empowering hundreds of team members worldwide to lead initiatives independently. Mission moments became a cherished tradition, sharing stories that reminded everyone of the human heart beating at the center of their work. Leo's philosophical pursuits deepened, and their late-night conversations grew richer and more complex. One night, he asked, "Mom, do you think kindness can really change the world? Even with so much pain and injustice?" Emma looked at him, eyes soft but resolute. "Kindness is the spark, Leo. It doesn't erase the darkness, but it gives us the light to find our way through." The Amazon project's success galvanized Emma to push even harder on integrating kindness into emerging technologies. She spearheaded the development of new Ember Unit features designed to promote community engagement and emotional well-being. These included personalized messages of encouragement broadcast across networks and systems that recognized and rewarded acts of kindness among users. The work attracted attention from tech giants and social innovators alike, sparking collaborations that further blurred the line between technology and humanity. Yet Emma remained grounded, reminding herself and her team that progress without kindness was hollow. Her letters to Leo evolved into reflections on leadership, resilience, and the importance of staying true to one's values amid chaos. One particularly poignant letter read, "The world will ask you to harden your heart. Remember, it is your softness that will build bridges others can't see." As the year turned, Emma faced a new personal challenge. Her father's health declined, prompting her to balance the demands of global leadership with the intimate care of family. The experience deepened her understanding of sacrifice and the complicated nature of love. Themes she had grappled with throughout her life. It was a reminder that kindness extended inward as much as outward. During a visit home, her father shared stories of his youth, of mistakes and regrets, but also of hope. "You've come a long way, Emma," he said quietly. "I'm proud of the woman you've become." Tears welled in her eyes. That night, she wrote in her journal, "Kindness is the legacy we inherit and the gift we give. It's in our mistakes, our growth, and the bridges we build." The Amazon project's final phase involved training a network of local leaders to sustain the technology and archive independently. Emma watched with pride as Layla, now fluent in several indigenous languages and an expert in Ember systems, took charge of the handover. The community's resilience and wisdom inspired Emma, reaffirming her belief that kindness empowered rather than limited. As she prepared to return to headquarters, Emma reflected on the journey. On the unexpected advice that had transformed her approach to leadership and life. Elon's words about kindness had become more than a motto, they were a compass guiding every decision, every challenge, every victory. The path ahead was uncertain, but Emma was ready. Because in kindness, she had found not just strength, but purpose. And purpose was a light that could never be extinguished. Emma returned from the Amazon project with a renewed sense of mission but also an awareness that the journey ahead was fraught with new challenges. The global spotlight on HeartForge had intensified, attracting interest from powerful players in government and industry who saw both opportunity and threat in the organization's rapid growth. As she walked through the bustling HeartForge headquarters, she felt the pulse of a team energized but stretched thin. The delegation program was flourishing, but with growth came complexity. Decisions that once were simple now required navigating a labyrinth of regulations, cultural sensitivities, and competing priorities. Emma convened a leadership retreat, bringing together senior staff, engineers, and community liaisons to address the mounting pressure. She opened the meeting with a question: how do we stay true to kindness when the world demands results? The room was silent at first, then voices rose, some fearful, some hopeful. Raj spoke of burnout and the need for self-care. Tessa emphasized transparency and listening. Leo, now home from college, joined via video call, sharing insights from his philosophy studies about compassion as a form of radical resistance. Emma realized that kindness was not a fixed trait but a practice requiring constant renewal. She introduced new initiatives aimed at sustaining that practice: mindfulness sessions, peer support groups, and leadership training focused on emotional intelligence. The transformation was gradual but palpable. At the same time, HeartForge faced external challenges. A powerful conglomerate known as VexCorp launched a campaign to discredit the organization, painting it as naive and reckless. Rumors circulated that Ember technology was unreliable, that HeartForge was mismanaging funds, that local communities were unhappy. Emma confronted the attacks with transparency, inviting independent audits and opening communication channels to the public. She refused to be defensive, instead using the opportunity to share honest stories of struggle and success. The strategy worked in part, but the pressure took its toll. Staff morale dipped, some key partners hesitated, and Emma questioned if kindness alone could withstand such force. One evening, after a particularly harsh media interview, she received a message from Elon: kindness is your weapon, but also your shield. Use it wisely. Protect yourself and your team. Remember, even the strongest hearts need rest. Emma took the advice to heart. She began setting boundaries, saying no to requests that would dilute focus, prioritizing well-being alongside mission. The shift brought relief and clarity. Meanwhile, new projects emerged. HeartForge partnered with education nonprofits to deploy Ember units in underfunded schools, providing light, internet access, and even digital libraries featuring the Amazon archive. Students like Layla's younger sister, who had started volunteering remotely, benefited immensely. The ripple effects were tangible: improved attendance, enhanced learning, and growing community pride. Emma attended a school event, watching as children's faces lit up not just from the technology but from the possibility it represented. It was a reminder that kindness was both big and small, changing lives in ways visible and invisible. As HeartForge expanded, Emma's relationship with Leo evolved too. They debated fiercely about ethics, climate policies, and the role of technology in society. One night, Leo challenged her: are we doing enough? Or are we just putting a bandage on deeper wounds? The question haunted Emma. It pushed her to push further, to deepen partnerships with activists, indigenous leaders, and policymakers. She understood that kindness was not a cure-all but a foundation on which systemic change could build. She initiated HeartForge's first policy and advocacy division, aiming to influence legislation that protected vulnerable communities and promoted sustainable development. The move sparked internal debate. Some feared politicizing the organization might alienate donors, others embraced the chance to make broader impact. Emma stood firm: kindness without justice is incomplete. In the midst of these transformations, personal challenges resurfaced. Her father's health fluctuated, and Emma struggled to balance caregiving with leadership demands. She confided in David Larson, who reminded her that kindness began at home. She learned to ask for help, to accept imperfections, and to give herself grace. The experience deepened her empathy, making her a more compassionate leader. Towards the end of the year, HeartForge celebrated its 5-year anniversary. The event brought together partners, beneficiaries, and supporters from around the world. Emma delivered a keynote speech that was both candid and hopeful. She spoke of kindness as a radical act in a fractured world, of resilience born from vulnerability, and of the power of community to transform despair into possibility. The applause was thunderous, but Emma knew the real work continued beyond the spotlight. That night, as she reflected alone, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Elon. "Proud of how far you've come. Remember, kindness is a journey, not a destination. Keep walking." Emma smiled, feeling the weight of the path ahead but also the strength of the heart that guided her steps. Because in kindness, she had found not just a way to change the world but a way to live fully within it. Emma stood at the edge of a bustling city plaza, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the crowd gathered for the launch of HeartForge's newest initiative, Community Circles. These were designed to be neighborhood hubs powered by Ember units, places where people could connect, learn, and support one another in environments too often fractured by isolation and hardship. The idea was simple but profound: technology as a catalyst for kindness at the grassroots level. As she surveyed the faces before her, diverse in age, race, and background, Emma felt a familiar surge of hope mingled with the weight of responsibility. The community circles represented everything she and her team had been building toward, a manifestation of kindness that wasn't just given but shared and multiplied. The launch was a whirlwind of energy. Volunteers distributed Ember units and explained their functions. Local artists painted murals symbolizing unity. Children played games facilitated by interactive screens connected through the network. Emma walked among the crowd, pausing to listen to stories and witness small acts of kindness. A young woman helping an elderly man with his coat, a group organizing a food drive, neighbors exchanging smiles that had long been absent. But amidst the joy, Emma knew challenges lurked beneath the surface. Poverty, distrust, and systemic neglect had left deep scars. The success of community circles depended not just on technology but on rebuilding fractured relationships and trust. She convened weekly meetings with local leaders and volunteers, encouraging honest dialogue about fears, hopes, and obstacles. One evening, a heated discussion erupted over resource allocation. Some argued the units should prioritize education, others healthcare, some community safety. Emma facilitated patiently, emphasizing that kindness required listening as much as leading. She reminded the group, "We build together or not at all." Slowly, consensus emerged, and with it a renewed commitment. The community circles became more than places. They became living ecosystems of care, where neighbors exchanged skills, organized support networks, and found joy in shared purpose. Emma watched a young man, Jamal, lead a literacy workshop, his quiet confidence growing with each session. She saw Maria, a single mother, coordinate childcare so she could attend night classes powered by Ember units. These everyday heroes embodied kindness in action. Yet, not everyone welcomed change. Local officials wary of outside influence pressured HeartForge to modify its approach. Some vendors sought to commercialize the network, threatening to disrupt its free and inclusive nature. Emma confronted these challenges head-on, advocating fiercely for the community's voice and autonomy. She forged alliances with grassroots activists and legal experts to safeguard the project's integrity. Through it all, Emma learned the delicate balance of diplomacy and determination. As months passed, the impact of community circles rippled outward. Crime rates dropped as social cohesion improved. School attendance rose. Health clinics reported better outcomes thanks to improved communication. Emma received messages from across the country, people inspired to start their own circles, adapting the model to local needs. The movement was growing, fueled by kindness and the belief in collective strength. But Emma also faced internal struggles. The relentless pace, the constant demands, the emotional toll of witnessing suffering and injustice weighed heavily. One night, overwhelmed, she called Leo. Their conversation reminded her of Elon's early advice: kindness begins with self-care. Emma began prioritizing rest, meditation, and time with loved ones. She encouraged her team to do the same, fostering a culture where vulnerability was strength, not weakness. This shift rejuvenated HeartForge, sparking creativity and resilience. Innovation flourished as team members brought renewed energy to their work. Amid these transformations, Emma received an unexpected invitation from a major tech conference. She was to deliver the keynote on the role of kindness in innovation, a platform that could amplify HeartForge's message globally. Preparing her speech, Emma reflected on her journey, the lessons learned from Elon, David Larson, and countless others. She crafted a narrative weaving technology, empathy, and action into a call to arms for a kinder future. The day of the conference arrived, and Emma stepped onto the stage, heart pounding but steady. She opened with a story of Layla, the girl from the refugee camp whose spark of curiosity had grown into a flame of empowerment. She spoke of community circles and the Amazon archive, of resilience born from connection. Her words resonated deeply with the audience, many moved to tears. Emma challenged innovators to embed kindness into the DNA of their creations, reminding them that the true measure of progress was the impact on human hearts. The response was overwhelming. Invitations to collaborate poured in from unexpected quarters: artists, policymakers, educators, entrepreneurs. Emma embraced the opportunity to build bridges, expanding HeartForge's reach and deepening its mission. As the conference concluded, Emma felt a profound sense of purpose but also humility. The path of kindness was not easy or linear. It demanded courage to face opposition, patience to nurture growth, and wisdom to know when to lead and when to listen. Returning home, she found a letter from Elon. In it, he wrote, "You've become a beacon in a world desperate for light. Remember, kindness is not a finish line but the journey itself. Keep walking." Emma smiled, feeling the warmth of those words settle deep within her. She looked out at the city skyline illuminated by ember lights, a testament to the power of one idea nurtured by kindness to spark change across the globe. And she knew the journey was far from over. It had only just begun. Emma's phone buzzed relentlessly as she prepared for a crucial meeting with potential investors. HeartForge was entering a pivotal phase, and securing funding meant balancing the demands of growth with the core values of kindness that had shaped everything. The room was sleek, filled with suited figures whose eyes measured numbers more than narratives. Emma began by sharing the story of Jamal's literacy workshop and the ripple effects of community circles. She spoke passionately about how kindness powered innovation and how technology was meaningless without heart. Some investors nodded, others remained skeptical, concerned about returns and scalability. The tension was palpable. Emma fielded tough questions about sustainability, competition, and risks. She acknowledged the challenges openly but emphasized that HeartForge's mission was about more than profit, it was about reshaping how the world connected and cared. After hours of deliberation, a few investors stepped forward with conditional offers. Emma weighed their terms carefully, wary of compromises that could dilute the organization's soul. She convened her leadership team to discuss the proposals, encouraging candid dialogue about fears and hopes. Raj cautioned against rapid expansion, advocating for steadiness. Tessa reminded them of the communities relying on their support. Leo challenged them to envision the legacy they wanted to leave. Ultimately, Emma chose partners who aligned with HeartForge's values, insisting on transparency and community involvement in decision-making. The funding brought relief but also new responsibilities. Projects accelerated, new Ember units deployed, and fresh faces joined the team. Emma focused on preserving the culture of kindness amid growth, implementing mentorship programs and open forums for staff feedback. Yet, as the organization grew, so did complexity. Emma grappled with balancing innovation and inclusion, efficiency, and empathy. A scandal rocked the tech world when a rival company misused data, casting suspicion on similar technologies. HeartForge's reputation teetered. Emma responded swiftly, reinforcing data privacy and ethical standards. She organized public workshops explaining their safeguards and emphasizing respect for users' dignity. The transparency rebuilt trust, but the experience underscored the fragility of kindness in a competitive market. Meanwhile, Emma's relationship with Leo deepened in unexpected ways. His questions became sharper, his critiques more nuanced. One night, he challenged her, "Is kindness always enough? Sometimes, the world demands tough choices." Emma pondered this, realizing that kindness wasn't softness but strength, the courage to make hard decisions guided by compassion. She shared this insight in a letter to Leo, encouraging him to see kindness as both a compass and a shield. Amid these trials, HeartForge launched an ambitious program to integrate Ember technology into disaster relief efforts. Emma coordinated with NGOs and governments to provide rapid communication and power restoration in crisis zones. The initiative saved lives and forged new partnerships, demonstrating kindness in action amid chaos. But the emotional toll was heavy. Emma visited survivors, hearing stories of loss and resilience that both broke and strengthened her spirit. She leaned on David Larson's wisdom about kindness being a practice of presence as much as action. Self-care became imperative. She prioritized rest and reflection, encouraging her team to do likewise. During a rare break, Emma traveled to a quiet coastal town to recharge. There, she encountered a small community grappling with environmental devastation. Inspired by their determination, she helped establish a microgrid powered by Ember units, providing energy independence and hope. The experience reminded her of kindness's power to empower, not just comfort. As HeartForge approached its 10th anniversary, Emma planned a global summit celebrating kindness and innovation. Leaders, activists, artists, and technologists gathered to share stories and strategies. Emma's keynote speech reflected on the journey. The setbacks, breakthroughs, and the unwavering belief that kindness was the thread weaving them together. The summit sparked new collaborations and commitments, expanding the movement Emma had nurtured. On the eve of the event, Emma received a call from Elon. His voice was warm, tinged with pride. "You've taken kindness farther than I imagined. Keep pushing boundaries." Their conversation was a poignant reminder of the unexpected advice that had transformed her life and work. Emma felt ready for whatever came next because in kindness, she had found not just a strategy but a way of being, resilient, hopeful, and deeply human. Emma sat in the quiet corner of her office, staring at the latest reports from HeartForge's community circles. The data was encouraging: increased engagement, reduced isolation, rising volunteer numbers. But beneath the numbers, Emma sensed a deeper story unfolding. Kindness was growing, yes, but it was also evolving, becoming more complex, more challenging. The pressures of leadership, the competing demands of expansion, and the weight of expectations were shaping not only the organization but her as well. She thought back to Elon's advice: kindness is both a weapon and a shield. It demanded strength and care, courage and humility. Emma realized she needed to foster kindness not just outwardly, but inwardly, to herself and her team. She introduced new wellness programs focused on mental health, resilience training, and open conversations about burnout. Slowly, a culture of authenticity and vulnerability took root, breaking down old stigmas and forging deeper connections. At the same time, HeartForge faced a new challenge. A wave of misinformation spreading through social media threatened to undermine their work. False claims about Ember technology's safety and intentions sowed doubt among communities and donors. Emma knew silence was not an option. She mobilized a rapid response team to engage directly with affected communities, hosting live Q&A sessions, creating transparent educational content, and partnering with trusted local voices. The effort was exhausting but necessary. Through it, Emma saw the true power of kindness, not as naive trust, but as active listening, truth-telling, and patience. One evening, after a long day of crisis management, Emma received a message from Leo. He had organized a youth forum on ethical technology and invited her to speak. She accepted eagerly, seeing it as a chance to connect with the next generation shaping the future. The forum was electric. Young people challenged assumptions, raised tough questions, and shared their visions for a kinder, more just world. Emma spoke openly about Heartforge's journey, the successes and failures, the doubts and hopes. She emphasized that kindness was not passive but an ongoing choice to engage with empathy and integrity. The experience reinvigorated Emma's commitment and expanded her perspective. Returning to headquarters, she found a letter from a community leader in the Amazon, thanking Heartforge for supporting sustainable projects that respected indigenous knowledge and traditions. The words moved Emma deeply, a reminder that kindness honored history and culture as much as innovation. Inspired, she launched a new initiative to co-create technology solutions with indigenous communities worldwide, ensuring their voices guided development. This approach sparked new partnerships and deepened Heartforge's impact. Meanwhile, Emma's personal life flourished in subtle but meaningful ways. She spent more time with her father, sharing stories and quiet moments. David Larson remained a steady source of guidance, reminding her to balance ambition with grace. Leo's presence brought fresh energy and dialogue, challenging and comforting her in equal measure. Together, they navigated the complexities of love, identity, and purpose. Yet, the path was not without pain. A sudden health scare forced Emma to confront her own vulnerabilities. The experience stripped away pretenses, revealing the rawness beneath. Friends and colleagues rallied around her, their kindness tangible and healing. Emma emerged with a renewed sense of humility and strength, understanding that self-care was integral to leadership, not a luxury. As the year closed, Heartforge celebrated a milestone. Ember units had reached over 1 million people globally. Emma reflected on the journey from a spark of curiosity in a refugee camp to a worldwide movement rooted in kindness. The road ahead remained uncertain, full of challenges and opportunities. But Emma felt ready, armed with lessons from Elon and countless others, fueled by hope and human connection. In a quiet moment, she penned a note to Elon: "Your unexpected advice changed everything. Kindness is the foundation on which we build the future." She smiled, knowing that the greatest journey was not measured in miles or milestones, but in hearts touched and lives transformed. Emma sat quietly in her home office, the soft glow of ember light casting a warm halo around her as she prepared for what felt like one of the most important conversations of her life. It was a video call with a coalition of global leaders and innovators, all gathered to discuss the future of Heartforge and the role kindness would play on a planetary scale. The stakes were high, but Emma felt calm. She thought back to the moment Elon had first shared his unexpected advice, the moment kindness transformed from an abstract ideal into a powerful force that could change lives. The call began with introductions and updates, but soon, the discussion deepened into the difficult realities of climate change, inequality, and technological disruption. Emma listened as voices debated funding, strategy, and political will. When her turn came, she spoke plainly and passionately. Kindness is not just a soft skill or an optional virtue. It's a radical act of courage. It demands that we listen to those most affected, that we put people before profit, and that we innovate with empathy and integrity. The room grew silent, then a few nods of agreement surfaced. Emma proposed a bold new initiative, the Kindness Accord, a global pact committing organizations, governments, and communities to embed kindness into their policies and technologies. She envisioned a world where decisions were measured not only by economic gain but by impact on human dignity and connection. The proposal sparked animated debate. Skeptics questioned its feasibility, while champions saw a transformative path forward. Emma navigated the discussion with patience and clarity, drawing on stories from Heartforge's journey, how kindness had healed wounds, built bridges, and sparked innovation. After hours of dialogue, the coalition agreed to pilot the Kindness Accord in selected regions, with Heartforge leading implementation. The moment was historic. Emma felt a surge of hope but also the weight of responsibility. The road ahead would be long and fraught with obstacles. In the days that followed, Emma coordinated with diverse stakeholders, policy makers, technologists, activists, and community leaders, to design frameworks ensuring that kindness would guide decision-making and innovation. The effort demanded diplomacy, cultural sensitivity, and unwavering commitment. At times, Emma grappled with frustration as progress slowed by bureaucracy and competing interests. She reminded herself of Elon's words, "Kindness requires perseverance, even when the world seems indifferent." Meanwhile, HeartForge continued its work on the ground. New Ember units reached remote villages, refugee camps, and urban neighborhoods alike, empowering people with light, knowledge, and connection. Emma traveled to meet these communities, witnessing firsthand the difference kindness made. She shared meals, stories, and laughter with people whose resilience inspired her. Each encounter deepened her conviction that technology must serve humanity, not the other way around. During one visit to a coastal town recovering from a devastating hurricane, Emma observed how Ember-powered communication hubs had accelerated relief efforts and fostered community rebuilding. She met a group of volunteers who organized daily kindness circles, spaces where people shared their struggles, hopes, and support. Emma realized that kindness was the glue holding these fragile ecosystems together. Back at headquarters, Emma championed initiatives to make HeartForge's technology accessible and inclusive. She pushed for multilingual interfaces, culturally adapted content, and user-led design. The team embraced the challenge, innovating with creativity and compassion. Successes and setbacks interwove as the organization grew. Amid the whirlwind of progress, Emma maintained close ties with David Larson and Leo. Their conversations grounded her, reminding her that kindness begins with presence and honest connection. Leo's youthful idealism sparked new ideas and challenged assumptions, while David's wisdom offered perspective and calm. Together, they formed a support system woven from empathy and shared purpose. One evening, as Emma reflected on the journey, she penned a message to Elon: "The kindness accord is taking shape. Your advice remains my compass. Thank you for teaching me that kindness is not weakness but the greatest strength we have." Elon replied with a simple line: "Keep lighting the way." Emma smiled, feeling the warmth of those words as the ember light flickered softly beside her, a beacon of hope in a world both fragile and fierce. She knew the journey was far from over, but with kindness as her guide, she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Emma stood at the threshold of a new frontier in HeartForge's mission, a project unlike any before. It was called Project Horizon, an ambitious effort to harness Ember technology to bridge digital divides in the most underserved and disconnected communities around the world. The goal was not merely to provide access but to create environments where kindness could flourish through meaningful human connection enabled by technology. Emma remembered the first time Elon had said, "Kindness is the strongest currency." At that moment, it had sounded abstract, almost poetic. Now, it was the foundation of everything she did. The project's scope was vast: remote villages in the Himalayas, isolated island communities, urban neighborhoods shadowed by poverty and neglect. Each location posed unique challenges, geographical, cultural, and political. Emma and her team embraced these complexities, driven by the conviction that kindness could transform even the harshest circumstances. Early setbacks tested their resolve. Equipment shipments delayed by weather and bureaucracy. Language barriers hampered communication. Skepticism and mistrust ran deep. Emma traveled frequently, meeting with local leaders and residents, listening intently to their stories and concerns. She insisted on co-creating solutions, ensuring the technology reflected the community's needs and values. One memorable visit was to a mountainous village where an elder told Emma, "We have waited generations for someone to hear us, not just speak at us." The word struck Emma deeply. She realized kindness was about respect and empowerment, not charity or control. Slowly, Project Horizon began to take shape. Ember units provided clean energy and communication hubs, enabling access to education, healthcare, and markets. Digital literacy workshops, led by community members, nurtured confidence and skills. Emma watched as people who once lived in isolation discovered new possibilities, rekindling hope and ambition. The ripple effects were profound. School attendance rose, local businesses thrived, and a renewed sense of community pride emerged. Emma felt humbled witnessing these transformations. Yet, Project Horizon also revealed the delicate balance between technology and tradition. Some feared that rapid change threatened cultural identity. Emma worked closely with elders and cultural custodians, supporting efforts to preserve language, stories, and customs alongside innovation. This synergy became a hallmark of HeartForge's approach, technology as a tool for honoring heritage, not erasing it. Amid these successes, Emma faced personal challenges. The relentless travel and pressure strained her relationships and health. One night, after a long day in a remote village, she confided in Leo her fears of losing herself in the mission. Leo reminded her of Elon's lesson, kindness starts within. Emma recommitted to self-care, setting boundaries and making time for reflection and connection. This balance renewed her energy and clarity. At headquarters, the team embraced the ethos of kindness with renewed vigor. They developed new features for Ember units enabling virtual storytelling and cultural exchange, fostering global empathy and understanding. Emma spearheaded partnerships with artists and educators to amplify voices often unheard. The impact reached far beyond technology, touching hearts worldwide. Project Horizon gained international recognition, but Emma remained grounded. She knew that true kindness required ongoing commitment and humility. The journey was a tapestry of successes and setbacks, joy and struggle. One day, as Emma reviewed a message from a teacher in a distant village, she smiled. The teacher wrote of students using Ember-powered tablets to share their stories with peers across continents, building friendships and breaking stereotypes. Emma felt a profound sense of fulfillment. In the quiet moments before sleep, she often revisited Elon's words, finding new meaning in them as the journey unfolded. Kindness, she realized, was not a destination but a way of being, a continuous act of listening, learning, and loving. As Project Horizon expanded, Emma felt ready for whatever challenges awaited, buoyed by the strength of kindness that had become her greatest currency. Emma's phone vibrated again with another message from the field, this time from a team member working in a refugee camp in Syria. The report was both heartening and sobering. Ember technology had restored power and communication for thousands, yet the trauma and uncertainty in the camp remained palpable. Emma felt a familiar mix of hope and urgency. She understood better than ever that kindness wasn't a simple fix but a persistent commitment amid hardship. The days that followed were filled with coordination and reflection as Emma strategized how HeartForge could deepen its impact. She convened a diverse group of advisors, psychologists, social workers, engineers, and community activists, to design programs that integrated emotional healing alongside technological aid. The idea was to create safe spaces powered by Ember units where people could gather, share stories, and rebuild trust. These kindness havens would offer workshops, counseling, and creative activities designed to foster resilience and connection. Emma traveled to the camp to oversee the initiative, stepping into a world both fragile and fiercely alive. She met families who had lost everything yet clung to hope through acts of kindness, sharing food, teaching children, supporting neighbors. Emma was humbled by their strength and reminded of Elon's advice, kindness is a radical act of courage. One afternoon, a young woman named Amina approached Emma. She was a volunteer teaching literacy classes in one of the kindness havens. Amina shared how the community circles had helped people confront pain and find solidarity. Emma listened closely, realizing that kindness was as much about presence and listening as it was about action. The experience transformed Emma's perspective, deepening her commitment to a holistic approach that honored both technology and humanity. Back at HeartForge's headquarters, Emma inspired her team with stories from the field, igniting renewed passion and creativity. They developed new features for Ember units, apps for mental health support, platforms for storytelling, and tools to connect displaced families across borders. Emma championed partnerships with NGOs and governments to expand the reach of kindness havens. Challenges persisted, funding hurdles, logistical nightmares, and the ever-present weight of human suffering. Yet, Emma held fast to the belief that kindness could carve pathways through despair. Amid the intensity, Emma found moments of light. She hosted virtual gatherings where team members shared their own stories of kindness, reminding each other why the work mattered. She celebrated milestones and honored unsung heroes on the front lines. In quieter moments, Emma nurtured her personal relationships. Conversations with Leo grew deeper, their bond strengthened by shared ideals and vulnerability. David Larson remained a steady anchor, offering wisdom and gentle reminders to rest and recharge. One evening, Emma reflected on the journey, from a spark of curiosity inspired by Elon's words to a movement transforming lives across continents. She wrote in her journal, "Kindness is not just an act, it's a way of seeing the world, a radical courage that can light the darkest places." As Heartforge prepared for its next chapter, Emma knew the road ahead would be challenging. But with kindness as her compass, she felt ready to face whatever storms might come. The journey was far from over, but the flame of hope burned brighter than ever. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?